So it's April 1st, 2025. What else is it? It's April Fool's Day. Won't hear much fooling around here. It's also Election Day with big races in Florida and Wisconsin. And of course, it's what does the president call it? Liberation Day? Is that what he calls it? It's
Yeah,
Liberation Day,
Liberation Day
Liberation
Eve.
Day Eve.
Yes.
So a lot going on. Thank you for joining the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I will spin you through the day's events. A lot going on Capitol Hill. We won't even be able to tell you about all of it, but we'll tell you about some, and then we'll do our own little analysis, and then we welcome. In fact, we crave with a mighty thirst your participation. So if you've got yourself onto the two-way platform, like Sharon and Peter and Dan, please raise your electronic hand. We'd love to have you be part of the conversation. We'll get to as many of you as time allows. And if you're watching on two-way on YouTube or X, simple rules. Number one, no smack in the chat. Number two, adhere to the rule of peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace for all. And number three, don't talk to us because we can't hear you. But we're glad to have you here. Sean, you big April Fool's guy.
I am.
You are. All right. I know you are because Sean likes to do this thing when we do sound checks where he'll go like this. Yeah. Yeah. So that's like a daily. Like for some people, every day is Christmas. For Sean, every day is April Fool's Day. So I'm not surprised. Have you done any
Already got a
pranks?
couple of zingers
Yeah.
out there
Yeah.
on the X
On
platform.
the X platform. That's a good format for April Fool's. Dan, how do you feel about April Fool's Day?
I am not. I love to joke with other people. I do not like to be on the receiving end. And my
Uh,
wife sent a family group chat that Juan Soto had broken his leg and was out for the season. And for about 10 seconds, we all believed it.
that is a good one. I would have fallen
Yes.
for that. Sean, are you ever you like surprise parties?
Oh, I like to throw them.
Yeah.
It's same kind of mischievous nature
Yeah.
there. The
That's what I was thinking.
planning and the plotting. I will have more to update tomorrow on post April Fools because there will be several people that will fall victim today.
Okay, we look forward to the after action report. Again, thank you for being part of this community. And here we go. Two ways coming up today, which I'll tell you about later. Mike Moynihan reported for, and then a special two-way tonight with Dina Powell and David Powell, and a cast of not thousands, but many people.
David McCormick.
What did I
Just
say?
yeah,
David
you
Powell? Is
said,
that what I
yeah.
said?
I'm sure Dina would love that, but
I was
Yeah.
just going to say
Sorry.
Dina's
Dina,
husband,
Dina
aka
Powell,
U.S. Senator
Dina
David
Powell,
McCormick.
Dina Powell McCormick, and U.S. Senator David McCormick, not David Powell. They will be here at 6 o'clock. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The president today, uh, the pool, Sean. Uh, sorry, go back. New media,
WTN.
EWTN. Tell everybody about that.
That is the Catholic network.
And they weren't in the pool, and ironically, when we had a Catholic
But
president.
they have had a seat, and this is interesting to me because EWTN, you might know them from Raymond Arroyo. He's got a big show on there, but they've got a lot of correspondence. They've been part of the White House briefing room for quite some time.
Yep, that's right. My friends at Newsmax, Sean's friends at Newsmax, are the secondary TV crew and correspondent today, day after their very successful IPO. All right, the president lunching with the vice president at 12:30. The first lady is doing an event, an International Woman of Courage award ceremony at the State Department at 1. And the president signs executive orders at 3:30. Currently closed press, but you never know. And the White House briefing is at noon. Already mentioned the vice president lunching with the president. Tons of stuff on Capitol Hill. I'm going to speed through it because there's too much to say. But here's some of the things. 9 a.m. House and Senate, House Republicans and Democrats hold their separate weekly conference or caucus meetings. Then at 9:30, the Armed Services on the Senate side starts the nomination process for the president's nominee to be head of the Joint Chiefs. Raisin Cane. Raisin Cane. President Trump loves nicknames for generals. 10 o'clock, Senate Finance has a hearing for the Social Security Commissioner nominee. 10 o'clock, House Republicans hold their weekly press conference. 10 o'clock also, House Judiciary holds a hearing on the federal judges who have ruled against the Trump administration. 10:45, House Democrats hold their presser. Now, well, let me keep going. 11:45, Democratic senators hold a press conference on this effort to have pass a measure that would bar the tariffs against Canada, which can pass the Senate potentially, may not, but won't pass the House. 2 o'clock, House Oversight holds a hearing on declassifying the JFK files. Late this afternoon, the so-called Big Six. Start thinking Big Six because this is the most important story in some ways going on. Doesn't get a lot of coverage because it's all process for now. Johnson, Thune, Crapo, and Smith, the chairs of Finance and Ways and Means, along with Scott Bessent and Kevin Hassett, The big six are the ones who are talking about talking turkey about reconciliation. They're meeting. Now, two more events, which we'll talk about in a minute. Democrats, we've said this before, they're very keen on Social Security being a big issue in the midterms. So both the House and Senate side, Democrats doing events. 11:45, Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren and some other senators are holding a press conference. They're launching a Social Security war room. Sorry, I said 11:45. That's at 11 a.m. And then Senate House Democrats are holding a Social Security event, including Hakeem Jeffries at 3. So both the Democrat leader in the Senate, Democrat leader in the House, both doing Social Security events today. We will talk about that. But we're going to start with tariffs. All right. Number 107, please. The Wall Street Journal today assigned, everybody wants to know what's the president going to decide. The president said yesterday he's made his decision, but didn't say what it was. Wall Street Journal assigned a team. One, two, three. Those are three great reporters. All figure out what he's going to do on tariffs. If you read the story, they have no idea. They basically said, here's all the things he might do. So there's indecision there. And there remains a lot of uncomfortableness in the business community. Amazing. If you go on X, you can read lots of prominent market analysts and heavyweight business leaders saying the tariffs are a horrible idea. We've seen the volatility in the markets. Here, I'm going to play you in a moment after I ask Sean a question. Pete Sessions, congressman from Texas, he's on CNN just moments ago, and he was asked about the tariffs and about the midterm and about the special election. We're going to talk about them both at once for a moment. Sean, how would you rate Pete Sessions on these two fronts from 0 to 10? 0 being Bernie Sanders, 10 being Steve Bannon, Super MAGA, and how would you rate him on truth teller scale? Is 0 to 10, 10 being total truth teller.
On tariffs and on
No,
the
in general, like, is he a guy who?
Pete's been around a while. He chaired the Rules Committee and chaired the NRCC. I mean, I think on the political front, he's got a strong sense of where things are. I've known Pete a long time. I don't think I'd
Yeah,
put him in the high category
yeah.
of like financial experts
Well,
or
okay, but
hardcore MAGA.
okay, so I'd say he's about a 7 on the MAGA scale.
Yeah, that's about
Yeah,
right.
and I'd say as a truth teller, he's also a 7 for a member of Congress. No offense
Yeah.
to members of Congress, but okay. So this guy is not, rock solid MAGA, but he's a supporter of the president, and he's a pretty honest guy. So here is number 108, Pete Sessions this morning on CNN.
Florida's 6th congressional district, just to talk about one of these special election races. What does it tell you that a district that was plus 30 Trump, that Republicans are sweating a little bit there now?
Well, in fact, they're called special elections for a reason. They are special. Not
Sean
only
Spicer
in
says
their
that all the
timing,
time.
but also the candidate that would be performing in those seats. I think that the Republican Party is very aware that we have some lines of division right now. As you know, there are a few things that perhaps have not gone exactly the way as smoothly as some people want. But when you break glass, when you move ideas, when you bring forth the things that you're doing, not everybody agrees. Today we're going to be in that same circumstance, or tomorrow with the tariff issue. This is why we support not only our party, but the concepts of capitalism, more jobs and opportunities for people, and that is where our candidates are.
So Sean, we're going to talk about tariffs in a range of dimensions, but just what do you think of the concern that exists at the White House and in the Hill for the fact that these things are happening like the same week, like the tariffs are front and center as voters are voting in Florida and Wisconsin?
Yeah. So look, first of all, I would say that was handled really well by Pete. I mean, I've said this all along, and Pete was NRCC chair after I was at the NRCC, so who knows where he got that phrase from. But I will just say that is that look, there are three things: the political environment, the candidate, and the mechanics that matter in all races. And in special elections, you look at Josh Wheel, the guy's raised over $10 million. He's got people really fired up. And I don't know Randy Fine. I've never met the guy, but from everything that I've been told by national folks and people in Florida, he's just not a dynamic guy. He's at odds with Ron DeSantis. So he's not, I mean, like this is not a unifying, like the teams out there all fired up. I think he'll still win probably in the 15-point area. They're going to have enough people. I mean, but so, and then again, when you go back to a general election, it's a non-issue, right? It's because it's a special election. People are paying a little bit of attention to it. The point being is this: I think there's going to be a little bit of a how bad was his campaign and the mechanics versus the environment. And I think that's why you've got to look at the through line through all three of these races today. If we were to get really close in two of them and lose Wisconsin, that would cause concern. If we pull out Wisconsin and win both of those, it's a bad night for Democrats. Like you can't just because you get closer in a special election doesn't matter. I mean, if they lost by 1 point in the Randy Fine race, okay, there's a little bit of a silver lining, but to what extent? The guy, Josh raised a ton of money. Randy did not. He did not run a good campaign. I mean, if you want to read something into it, read that, run better campaigns. Mechanics matter. Get out the vote matters. I think the tariffs, look, where this is a whole interesting second subject on the tariffs is you're not seeing, I mean, you look at some of the quotes from, I mentioned Ron Johnson earlier in the week, who is 9.9 on the MAGA scale, saying publicly, I'm worried, I'm concerned. And the problem going in right now is there's a lot of trust for the president and his agenda. People are willing to give him a lot of latitude because of how the base spoke in the election. But I'll tell you, this is where there's going to be an interesting dynamic come Thursday, Friday, Saturday, with the markets and how companies and industries are reacting. Because at the end of the day, they're willing to give the president a lot of latitude on this, but they also recognize that they're up for reelection. They've got to go home. They've got to represent their industries. And I will tell you, I think the president's bought into the philosophy right now of minimal disruption and there's going to be churn. The market's not looking good. This is something he sees every day. And I think if things don't go well, right, the way I define well, by the way, is countries tomorrow night into Thursday start coming and say, Mr. President, we have a 10% tariff on you. We're taking it to 2. We've got it this, we're taking it down. If the president can show that he is getting results, U.S. foreign direct investment coming into the United States, or other countries taking their tariff and non-tariff barriers down, that's a huge win. If that doesn't happen and there's retaliatory tariffs and markets start going nuts, I mean, there was a local car dealer on the news here who said, everything that's on the lot, the prices are good. We expect though anything afterwards, to see several $1,000s rise. And that's where I think, temporary, a week or two, whatever. This is where I think a lot of these members are going to are willing to hold hands for 5 days, a week, but this is going to be a problem going after that.
Dan, pick up on the combo of tariffs and the specials, and we'll keep talking about both for a bit.
Sure. So just on the specials, look, we can talk about candidate quality, the mechanics of the individual campaigns, and that's not unimportant. But what you're seeing in Florida is also what you saw in Iowa. It's what you saw in the Pennsylvania special election. And so for Republicans, the worry is the trend lines, which is that there is voter frustration with the economy. There is concern about tariffs, and there is even some concern about DOGE. And so I think, okay, if the Republican wins down in the Southwest Florida seat by 9, I think Democrats will feel pretty good. I think if it hits 15 or higher, Democrats will kind of be like, ugh, that this was not as good as we thought. We thought we were closer. The Republicans kind of came home and we couldn't really chip enough away. Obviously, Wisconsin, I agree with Sean. If we lose that, I think people will be demoralized because it's a blue wall state that really we need to stop using the blue wall term if that happens. I think on the tariffs, I mean, there's just 3 quick things. One, it's not good that there's a blame game already starting. You have all these stories of people, putting Howard Lutnick in the guillotine here. And so you don't see those stories on DEI and some of this other stuff the last couple months. So it says that internally they are divided and worried. I think, too, the real question, and Sean, you just alluded to it, the White House tolerance for pain. How much do they tell the public it's going to be 6 months, 4 months of pain and price increases and inflation? I think the answer is they won't. I've said this for over 2 months now. Trump does not want a trade war. He wants to threaten it. He wants people to grovel. He wants to say within 48 hours, I got to win and go home. He has no stomach for a month of trade. If inflation hit 8, 9, 10% going into summer, he'll cave like a cheap suit. He will.
This is where the thing that I found fascinating are 2 aspects of this. Number one, he has always, and Trump's narrative has always been consistent, going back decades, on tariffs will help U.S. Okay, Where the shift has occurred in the last several weeks is that suddenly they start talking about using this additional funds, $100 billion on autos, up to $600 billion in other, for deficit reduction. That's never been part of Trump's narrative. Why do I bring that up? Because somebody among his team is selling him that that's an added benefit of this. That's a very different play than going in and getting other countries to lower their tariff rates. Because now you're looking at it more as a long-term strategy, which will have a huge, effect on what's going on domestically. The other thing that I sort of get PTSD watching these guys do this is if you read any of the, Mark mentioned one of the stories, they're very consistent that Trump is playing this close to the vest. And so if you're the team responsible for rolling this out and you're not entirely sure what you're rolling out, that's to your point, Dan, about pinning the tail on the donkey. They're like, you know what? We have a plan. We're ready to go. But, you and you aren't letting this plan come to fruition. And I think if tomorrow goes sloppy, that's where I think you're going to see the blame game come in big
Yep.
time.
So let me say a couple things about tariffs and about the midterms, okay? Not the midterms, the specials. First of all, don't call me and ask me for exit poll results. There are no exit polls in these races, okay? Exit polls are not done by the government. They're done by news organizations. No one's doing exit polls here. There might be some, the committees might be doing some, but don't call me and ask me.
Not in a congressional race.
Well, some rich person might, but don't call me. They're not going to. You're right.
Yeah,
they're not doing exit polls,
right?
They're not.
Just
They're not.
text. Or
They're
signal.
not doing. They're not
You got a
standing
signal
at.
group.
They're not
Wait, hold
standing
on.
outside. Yeah,
Everybody that wants
there are
to know
there are no
exit
exit
poll
polls.
signal
There are no
group.
exit polls. The polls close at 7 in parts of Florida, 8 in the Panhandle, 9 in Wisconsin Eastern time. Do not call me and ask me for exit polls. There aren't any. Okay, there aren't any. So if it's close, now Florida's very good at counting. Wisconsin, If it's close in these races, we're not going to know. So don't call me or text me or signal me. Don't ask me because we won't know. We have to wait for them to actually count the votes. If the races are not close, and in Florida, they probably won't be, we'll know because Florida counts quick. So we'll know. So before you go to sleep, probably even in the East, you'll probably know who's winning those races. We may not know if Wisconsin's close. So don't call me. Thank you.
By the way, Wisconsin's counting isn't just, it's a nightmare.
Yes.
The way that they batch votes in like different districts is a nightmare.
They're not as bad. They're not the worst, but they're not the best. Now, on the tariffs, Dan's absolutely right that this is unusual. The knives are already out, not just for London, but they're not just people who are Trump allies in the business community who think this is nuts, okay, and suicidal. There are people in the administration who think it's nuts and suicidal, and they're mostly holding their tongue, but they're less holding their tongue in part because they don't like Lutnick personally. Okay, so that's driving it. It's a two-pronged motivation. One is they don't like the policy and they don't want to be blamed for it, and two is they don't like Lutnick, so they're happy to start in advance to do this. I am super curious to see how they do the rollout. Caroline Levitt yesterday in the driveway had her charts talking about the unfair trade practices of other countries, what that does to America's ability to sell overseas. They're on the short end of where most economists are, where most members of Congress are, where most business leaders are. So there's lots of loud voices and influential voices saying before the president even says what he's doing, this is a really bad idea. So I'm curious to see starting tonight and into tomorrow and then the next day, until and unless they start to get what Dan said might happen, which is people caving. I'm super curious to see how they message this for real people and for the filter, because the filter is opposed to what they're doing. All right. Real quick, Elon Musk last night did a teletown hall. He has put himself front and center Sunday night, last night in this Wisconsin race. Play 106, please.
We've got this issue with judges that are activists. They're not judges. They're just pretending to be judges. They're just politicians wearing judges' robes. And that's a huge problem. In fact, I think that's just generally a problem. It's not just a challenge with tomorrow's election in Wisconsin, but with the federal judges, where it's like, hey guys, you're really undermining faith. Like these judges are undermining faith in the legal system because they're supposed to be objective, but they're clearly not being objective. They're being just politicians, and this is not right. We should have an independent judicial system where it's not a matter of politics.
So Dan, Jonathan Martin of Politico and some others are saying this is a referendum on Musk, and if Republicans lose Wisconsin, it will hurt Musk. I've looked at some data. I'm also going on Spidey sense. I don't think the voters in Wisconsin are particularly focused on Musk, and I don't think it will affect Musk one way or the other, win or lose. Uh, do you think this is in any way a referendum on Musk?
No, it's not. But I mean, I do want to just say that was one of the most absurd things I've ever seen. He was doing that on the eve of an election for a judge. He has put $30, $40 million into a campaign for a judicial judge for which he is railing judges should not be political. I mean, just the irony of the insanity of Elon Musk sometimes is very rich. Look, I think anytime, whether it's George Soros or Elon Musk, you put $40 million into one state race, you kind of enter the conversation, whether it's right or not. So I think, victory has 1,000 fathers and defeat's a lonely orphan. I think if the Republican loses, Musk is going to get tagged a little. And if the Republican wins, Musk will no doubt take advantage of the fact that his, legend will grow and people will grovel to try to get him to invest in their race, whether for governor or whatever. But I don't think he's on the ballot per se. But it's a swing state, and the guy visited, called in. He is all in.
Well, Sean, that's beyond that. I mean, he dropped $3 million to the state party for GOTV efforts. I mean, this is a guy. This isn't. It's one thing just to show up. I mean, he really, really went all in funding a lot of the key mechanical pieces of a campaign that I think is going to be critical. And as we said, I mean, Wisconsin's very tough to poll, but there's some good data out there. Like giving the state party that kind of money in a race like this, they're talking about $90 million being the high water mark of where this thing is going to come down to. I think, look, I actually, if you're going to get attacked, you might as well get out there and explain. And so I give him a lot of credit for how he's handled himself and kind of invested in the race and not just done the show up stuff, which is show up, hand out the check or run a bunch of ads. But this is real money that's going to affect the ground game.
Do you think, Sean, if Republicans lose in Wisconsin, that Musk's public or private role will be diminished, or do you think he'll continue?
I don't. First of all, I think that the number will matter. So if it's 51-49, that's a lot harder to blame on somebody. If for some reason, which nothing suggests that, but if it ended up being 55-45, I think there will be some folks. But at the end of the day, the other thing is, when you're the richest man in the world, you don't really give a crap what everyone else thinks. And it's obvious, right? I mean, he's not like asking for permission to go do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He's doing it because he wants to, and I don't think he's going to care what anyone says.
But can I say, though, one thing I'd be really curious about? Because every time Musk speaks, it giveth and taketh. I mean, some of those comments just now, I have no doubt we are going to see in ads, right? The world's richest man throws temper tantrums when judges go against him as if like they should be in his pocket and he should own them.
But do you think past efforts, certainly they rev up the base, but past efforts to demonize the Koch brothers or George Soros, they're not as visible as Musk, so maybe there's a qualitative difference. But I just don't think going after rich people for either side has ever worked that I see.
I disagree in that his approval is coming down, and this is what I was about to say, he keeps putting himself front and center. He keeps going on Fox. He is calling into races. He is showing up on the campaign trail. I want to see if, to Sean's point, let's say the Democrat wins by 7 or 8. I don't think that'll happen, but if it did, what is Musk's reaction? Does he put his head down and go back to Doge for a week? Or does he go on Sean Hannity and pop off about, kind of, because he is a loose cannon. To your point, Sean, no one tells him what to do, and he's their daddy. And if daddy wants to go and spend more money and blame people and yell and threaten people, he'll do it, which is a Democrat. Mark, to your point, it's unprecedented. A man this rich who has embedded himself in the White House, who's spraying cash like it's water.
And who's going out on the trail. You never saw Soros or the Koch brothers on the trail. All right. 3 more topics I want to do, try to quickly, because we got a lot of hands up and I want to get to folks. So just quick answers from you guys. Number 103, please. So Doge has made mistakes. The foreign policy team's made mistakes, and the immigration folks have made mistakes. And this is a mistake that I think should trouble every American. A administrative error. The administration admitted last night that a Maryland father who has protected status in this country, who's married to an American, was sent to El Salvador to a prison by mistake. The administration has acknowledged, and they say as of now they don't know how to get him back. Sean, is this a mistake Americans should tolerate, or is this one that should alarm people?
Well, I mean, anytime that we're sending people to a prison that they don't deserve to go to, we should be concerned, right? I mean, I don't think you can excuse that. If somebody's not guilty of something and they get falsely incarcerated or sent somewhere, we should be concerned. So I wouldn't want to in any way associate myself with that. And I think we should be doing everything we can to make sure that, I mean, mistakes happen. I'm not excusing that, but I'm just saying, if that happens, we need to do what we can to get somebody to get the situation rectified.
Dan.
Yep. There's a reason we have due process in this country. And we've said on this show now for months, the issue with immigration was when regular people get swept up. What would be the public reaction? I think it's horrible. And Elon Musk should send a jet to go pick him up. Find a way to get him back. Get to yes. Don't tell me why no.
They should get him back. They should get the lawyers out of the way, and they should get him back. All right, Dan, as I said before, both Schumer and Jeffries and Elizabeth Warren and others are doing Social Security events today. Complicated issue. We've talked about it here before. I don't like demagoguery on it. People should be worried about saving the system, not scoring political points on it. I know that sounds naive. What do you make of the Democrats' effort to here in April, not in the election year, to drive this? Is this something that they can effectively drive starting now?
Well, we're going to find out. Remember in 2005 when George W. Bush was talking about reforming Social Security, and it turned out to backfire spectacularly. Look, this issue is going to come front and center here with reconciliation in the next few months. And so I think the history of this issue is it plays well. Doge has admitted some mistakes on this. And the reality is that the fraud that everyone keeps hearing about, or the 130-year-old that's getting a check, is 0.001% of this. The real, and that's a slight exaggeration because all you on X will follow up. But the real money is just running the program for regular people. And if they are going to try to touch this, or Medicare or Medicaid, Democrats are right to tee it up.
Sean, I want to ask you the question this way. Republicans have been vulnerable on this issue politically for as long as you and I have been involved. And Democrats are very aggressive about it. Republicans in this administration, including Musk, have made mistakes. Like at the RNC and at the White House, are they doing enough? Do you think they're saying we need to do more to play defense on this? Or are they saying we'll figure this out later? We have too much else going on. Because if Democrats think it's their main vulnerability, shouldn't Republicans be playing defense?
Well, so a couple things. One, Dan is right. I mean, the way that the Bush guys rolled it out, I think, wasn't the best back when they were tried. But that was an attempt to reform the program, which is still needed, by the way. I mean, you point that out. I mean, this is insane how we kick the can down the road and try to pretend that somehow doing nothing is actually trying to destroy it, is what it comes down to. So one, I'll be interested in what the Dems' response is. Two, we spoke of Elon. If you actually go back to the in-person event that he had in Wisconsin, fantastic discussion of, and I'm trying to find the comments but like of the fraud that's in that program, the number of people that are supposedly dead that are still, and it's not just, the key to understand this isn't that a 150-year-old person is a lot, it's people are using those Social Security numbers. They're using them of young people, of people that are deceased, to collect Social Security checks. So it's not like someone's claiming that there's actually a 150-year-old person alive and collecting benefits. If the White House is going to go down this road, though, whether it's reform or getting out fraud, you've got to understand the sensitivity of it. And that saying, okay, guys, and Elon did, I think, a really good job the other night, but you can't assume that one town hall is going to do this. They've got to go out if they're going to touch this. And that's where I think, to your point, Mark, what does the White House need to do? It says, hey, we're worried about tariffs this week. Okay, this is going to be our issue. So let's not create another shiny nickel for everyone to shoot at while we're dealing with this. So A, why don't you slow your roll on Social Security right now? And when you're ready to go do it, we need to have a bigger and broader comms meeting about how to talk about the problems, how we're going to do this, get allies on board, make sure Capitol Hill's on board. But Elon has gotten a lot of leeway on USAID and others because the public was already there. They were like, yeah, there's a ton of waste. These people do nothing, blah, blah, blah. There's a million, there's tons of money in the couches. They didn't have to sell that. That was already baked. Social Security, I think it's like, hey, slow down. I want you to hear what you're doing first. And that's where I think that they need to have a bigger and broader discussion about how to present the problems that exist in the program now and how they're going to address it. But Elon, at the end of his program, said, I want to be clear, no one's going to have their Medicaid or Social Security touched. We're just looking for reform. But you can't say that after the fact. That needs to be what you're leading with. We're not going to touch it. We're just going to do this. We want to enhance it. We want to make sure that only the right people get the money. They've got to need to just pause and figure that one out first. That's a different kettle of fish, as they like to say, than USAID.
Totally agree. All right.
Going to be tough too if the tariff stuff doesn't go well and keep saying trust us.
Yep. I agree with that also. Raise your hand here if you're on the two-way platform you want to get in. We'll get to you in a moment. I want to say a couple things about the mythical third term for Trump. Bloomberg's reporting that J.D. Vance is going to go to Italy this month for a couple days or 3 days. Hope he has good food. All right. So put up 104, please. Over the weekend, as you know, and the president told NBC, sure, third term. Every time he's in front of the press now, he says, sure, maybe a third term. People are saying, they're discussing it. Then now we're in the phase of the press coverage where people are doing sort of spin-off stories. So here's 105, the LA Times this morning saying, oh, this could be a state-by-state battle. Thanks to the many of you who reached out to me to say the clear reading of the Constitution suggests the president can't serve a third term, including he can't, because the qualifications for vice president are the same as president. He couldn't switch with Vance, run as vice president, resign, Vance resign, move up, reappoint Vance. I understand that that's your reading of the Constitution. It's mine also. But read the Wall Street Journal story today on this matter, and you'll find, this is why I say never predict judges, justices, or juries. You will find a law professor who says, in fact, that's not necessarily the right reading of the Constitution. So I don't think Trump will serve a third term. I don't think he'll run for a third term. But those of you who say it's open and shut based on your reading of the Constitution, I think you cannot look into the soul of 5 Supreme Court justices and say, in the end, they might not allow it. That's what I have to say about that. Either you guys want to weigh in on that matter? We've talked about it already this weekend.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that this is funny how, like, at the end of the day, I mean, Trump, people take, like, if you go back to the tape, we played it, I think, yesterday on the plane. He says lots of people are saying I can't. He never says I'm going to. And then everybody wigs out and goes, he says he's running for it. He didn't. He just said many people are saying it. I don't want to talk about it. Right. That's what he said. And everybody freaks out. Correct. I'm with you. I will say this as a non-lawyer, the way I read it is, if and first of all, do you really think that JD Vance or anyone would buy into the fact that I'm going to run a campaign, tell everyone that I'm really not running, you're going to give me money, and then I'll be the one who steps down and I don't get to live in the big house after spending
Thank you very much.
It's just,
Thank you very much. But I will say, if I have time today, I will email the link to the Wall Street Journal story to the many of you who reached out to me. I may not have time, so go to the Wall Street Journal if you don't have a subscription. Have Fox the paywall.
One quick thing before we take questions. You mentioned JD going to Italy. I do think it's worth noting, at least because in my circles this came up. If you think about what happened the past several days, particularly yesterday in Europe, JD goes to Europe, whatever this was, a few weeks back now, and what was interpreted as lecturing them on their freedoms. And then they ban a candidate for running for office. The UK is now saying that you can't have certain signs to express your views. I got to be honest. I think Europe owes JD Vance an apology. These guys are actually doing exactly what he said. They're banning candidates. They're banning speech. Whether it's the UK or France, I mean, it is amazing that no one's actually kind of coming up with this as a story and saying, Vance actually had it. What he said was right.
Yes, I'm with you.
I mean, I disagree about that, and I wonder if he's going for Easter.
Could be. Maybe the Pope. See the Pope.
Also, I will say, Mark, Kristen Davidson on 2-Way Tonight last night, great point about the third term troll. Keeps Trump's power within the base if people think he may run again. I thought that was a really smart point I hadn't thought about.
100%.
That's why
that's why he cites people are saying it.
Yeah.
All right, bring folks in as always on mute. Tell us where you are, who you're, and what's on your mind. Start out though with David Bonson, longtime member of our community, sponsor of 2-Way Tonight, and a man keenly interested in the economic certainties and uncertainties of life. David, good morning. What is on your mind, sir?
Did the market just open? What are you doing on here?
I have been in the markets for 3 hours, Dan, and I'm not exaggerating. I can tell you everything going on and why. And very busy morning. But Sean inspired me to jump in. I want to say his point about them now adding this narrative of the tariffs being potential deficit reduction. This is incredibly important economically for people to understand the incoherence of suggesting that we're going to bring domestic manufacturing back by getting all that business out of foreign countries and onshore, and that we're going to collect $100 billion of tariff money. I don't think it will be either, but it certainly can't be both. The administration would have to pick the lane of whether or not this is protectionist to domestic manufacturers or it is revenue creating. But it can't be both, because we're
David,
only getting revenue if it doesn't move the jobs back onshore.
why can't it
But
be
then
some? Why can't it be some of each, David? Why can't some sectors produce tariff windfall and some in some sectors onshoring?
But what would be the move onshore if the tariffs are being collected? The tariffs are there to allegedly incentivize moving back
But
onshore.
let's say making honey moves back to the United States, but we just tariff apples. Why, couldn't it be some of
this
each?
leads to the second point, Mark, which is all of that forgets the net impact of what the lost revenue is. That to the extent there is tax revenue we receive right now from business done that now goes away. For example, we employ an awful lot more people in the services sector, and the impact to lost hospitality, if less Canadians are coming, or the various things that we are already doing that now change as a result of the tariffs. The studies on net impact, if you were to believe that all the tariffs go through, and I'm still in the camp that most of this is being done to posture for better deals with other countries. I'm not stating this to be entirely critical of the administration. I'm stating it to say that this is not a line of attack or a line of reasoning coming from Secretary Bessent, that we're going to use tariff revenue to decrease the deficit. It's entirely coming from Pete Navarro and is not the consensus view within the administration. But no, I don't believe you would be able to cherry pick where you get higher revenue, where you get manufacturing jobs moved. There's going to have to be a net impact across all sectors.
The gentleman from Rhode Island, for what purpose do you rise?
I'll let Mr. Hassett share his thoughts on that later.
All right.
He wrote a whole book on it, Sean. It was fantastic. It just came out a few years ago.
Do you have Kevin Hassett on your show tonight?
No, I have someone else from the White House.
Okay. Do you want to tell us now who that is?
It is the Principal Deputy Press Secretary, Harrison Fields.
Awesome. All right. David, anything else you want to say or ask before you go?
No, I hope this was helpful.
Love very helpful. Love having you on. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. All right. Sharon, come on in. Tell folks who don't know where you are after you unmute and what's on your mind. And thank you for joining.
Hi, thanks. I'm from Indianapolis, and this is my first time talking, so yay.
We're very grateful to you for being here and for raising your hand. So thank you.
So my first question is more for you, Mark. About 2 decades ago, I was at a PR event with Bob Simon, who at the time was at CNN. And I had asked him, and this was when we kind of knew how some PR firms had been, like Hill and Knowlton, hadn't been hired by the Kuwait government to pre-sell that, and we knew all that. So I had asked him what percentage of CNN news stories were generated by PR or press releases or key messaging. And his answer, and I don't want to give the exact number because it was 20 years ago plus, and it's not all there, but his response was, it was really the vast majority. And I would say almost, I wouldn't be wrong, I think, if it was in like almost 80%.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a shocking answer at that time. So my question for you is, what percentage of current news stories do you think are generated by PR, lobbying firms, key messaging? And then also for you, how do you determine when you're talking to a source or when you're getting a story, whether it's generated, by a paid source?
Right. So very low percentage of news stories are generated that way, because a very large percentage of news stories are just what happened that day. So if you restrict it to the category of what are sometimes called enterprise stories or investigative stories, right? So a story about, the influence of the tobacco lobby on government policy. A very high percentage of those stories are done at the instigation of or with the help of special interest or PR firms or political figures, right? So
Right.
like I did a story early in my career about when the Clinton administration was being criticized for fundraising at the White House. Okay. Some Democrat went to the Reagan Library, got a video, which back then was, labor intensive thing to do, of Ronald Reagan doing a political event at the White House. And they gave it to me and they said, you can't say where it's from. You just got to say you obtained the tape. Now, I could have flown 3,000 miles to the Reagan Library and gotten the tape myself. My bosses at ABC said, we can't do this story without disclosing where you got the tape. I thought, no, that's not right. We can't disclose it. We can't use it because those were the terms. But my point is, to answer the second part of your question, I don't know the first part, I don't know the exact percentage, but a very high percentage of those stories are generated by, but not just PR firms, again, by
Right.
Democrats on Republicans, et cetera. The
Totally.
second thing is, the second part of your question is, I evaluate it based on the information. It was significant that Ronald Reagan had done basically what Bill Clinton did, and that was significant regardless of who brought it to my attention. So I don't if the Saudis pitch me a story that says Dan Turrentine eats fatty foods. If it's true that Dan Turrentine eats fatty foods, I don't care that it came from the Saudis, as long as I do all the due diligence around it. So it's not inherently bad to get stories from a
Right.
PR company, as long as the reporter does the due diligence and writes the story or does the story fairly.
So my question for you so just to follow up on that. So I'm in that field or
Yeah,
adjacent field,
yeah,
and I'm in, I probably spend about 2 to 3 hours a day looking at media.
yeah,
And so, I mean, you can tell that things are 100, you can see the key
yeah.
messages. All
Of
the
course.
Sunday shows are key
Yeah,
messages.
yeah,
I mean, people don't even try to use
yeah,
different adjectives anymore.
yeah.
Um, so isn't there a believability issue in that, a trust in
I
what you're
think I
hearing?
sure, but I think both they're journalists to the extent there are still journalists left, and I think the consumer has to beware and has to say if the entire Republican Party says up is down, doesn't mean it's true. If a PR firm says up is down, doesn't mean it's true. But if a PR firm says up is up, just because it came from a PR firm doesn't mean it's not true.
Mhm.
Sean, I know you have thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things that I've done both private sector wise and in campaigns, et cetera, which is there's stories that are going, hey, there's going to be a ton of stories on tariffs today, right? So maybe I represent Toyota and I'm calling up and saying, hey, I know you're going to be writing a story on the tariffs today. I want to make sure you've got our stats on this. We think this is going to be bad. We've got five dealerships that we could source you to that will show you their projections. So you can jump into an existing narrative where a story is going to get written. Or
Mhm.
two is that, like, you call a reporter, hey, I know that you cover uh cars. And I mean, so like but I want to pitch you on a new story. You're hearing about US manufacturers, but I'm going to tell you how we're doing it differently because there's an angle that hasn't been covered. So
Right.
sometimes it's jumping into a narrative, or in the political world, to Mark's point, we would, every time that you see half of these investigative reporters, not half, 99%, that's not a scoop. It's when ABC has discovered, that means somebody laid out for them all of the
Right.
opposition research and said, here's an awesome hit piece. I'm going to document it all. To Mark's point, you can't just walk up and say, hey, I've got a rumor that so-and-so did really bad things. We can make the entire case for you. Here is
Right.
all of the puzzle pieces to do it. We're going to show you how the puzzle gets made, document everything. You'll expect them to go to the other side, but if you've done your job well, it's
It's
rock and
done.
hot sauce,
Yeah.
locked in. So I think there's a big difference. And the reality is that you can't, when you were talking about your original source, a lot of reporters won't fess up to it, right? They're, hey, like, you call them, hey, I got a great story for you. Da, 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 da. Well, they're going to call their editor and say, I'm working on this piece. I've got five sources. Like, so how it could ever get measured, to me, would be very difficult. There's stuff that's genuine, but there's also, like, I get calls probably all the time. Hey, my editor wants me to do a follow-up on how the White House does this. Can I talk to you about this? They saw a story in the New York Times. They want us to do their version of it. Blah, 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 blah. So, how much is coming from an editor or up top? How much is getting pitched to them? It depends.
Yep. I agree with all that. Dan, you want to weigh in?
You guys have said it well.
Okay. All right. Sharon, thank you. Grateful to you. Thanks. Please come back regularly. Love having you on. All right. Christina, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind after you unmute. And thank you for being part of Two Way.
Sure. Thank you for having me. This is my first time in the morning show. So I am from the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm not a Trump supporter, which here seems to be a lot very common. So I just wanted to come in this morning and say hello and talk to you about something I'm very happy that you brought up today, Mark, which is about immigration. So I am a Venezuelan American. I was born in Venezuela. I was an elected official for 4 years. I served as a school board member. I work in immigration. I'm an attorney, and
elected in the U.S.
Yeah, elected in the U.S. Yes, I've been in the United States for 18 years. I run a campaign, was elected. I also served for 4 years. So I have experience in public office. And I am an immigrant myself. I'm a naturalized citizen, right, from a country that now apparently according to the administration, we are all either from the Tren de Agua, from the TDA, or, there's been a very wide brush painted on all of us. So I really wanted to take the opportunity to come in this morning and talk to you because I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this, and especially in conservative media. So I also heard you talking at the Megyn Kelly show last Friday, when you were talking about the deportations of people who are supposedly gang members to El Salvador. And I just wanted to bring it up to the audience and to you because I think as a lawyer and someone who loves this country very much, and one of the reasons why I am a naturalized citizen is because I love the freedoms and I love what this country stands for. And I also have interviewed countless of people who have become US citizens. And one of the things that they appreciate about this country is the fact that they come here and they enjoy the freedoms like due process and freedom of speech that they don't enjoy in their home countries. If you want to feel patriotic, go to an oath ceremony where people become US citizens and you will see the love that these people have for the flag and for the United States. And the fact that our country, it's now basically denying due process to people that just because the administration set up a very rigged and suspicious process on how to remove people from the United States into prisons in another country where they are not from, I think people should be very frustrated. In fact, they should be thinking that this is something absolutely outrageous. So I also want to say that this narrative around what is happening in Venezuela or what's happening in immigrants, I think needs to be fact-checked. And I'm sure it's very difficult for you, Mark, to be on top of every news. I've been hearing you for months now, so I know that you cannot cover everything. But for example, Elon Musk in his town hall was talking about all these things around Social Security and all the numbers of non-citizen people who are non-citizens getting Social Security numbers. I couldn't believe the amount of lies that were coming out of his mouth and the surrogate that he brought to the stage. If you go through the immigration,
why is that a lie? Like, I'm just curious, why is that a lie?
For sure, I will be happy to tell you. So since I have worked with a lot of immigrants from the beginning to the end, I can tell you, you can come with for example, a student visa to the United States. You can also come to the United States because a family member petitioned you. You can come with a J-1 visa if you're a doctor. And when that moment, when you have a legal permit or a work permit to be in the United States, you immediately can enroll in Social Security. That doesn't mean that you have the ability to vote, but that's how you can show you get a work permit and then you immediately go to the Social Security Administration and you get a Social Security number. So one of the things that happens, for example, if you seek asylum in the United States, and you can be against the policy, and that's a policy discussion. But once you seek asylum in the United States, there's a possibility for you to ask for a work permit where you are waiting for your asylum to be processed. And then you get a Social Security number. And making the connection that those 2 million people that got a Social Security number are then voting or is an illegal thing that Biden did.
Wait, Christina, the
something
process
that has been done for
the process that you just described is exactly what he says on the video. He literally says, claim asylum, you apply for the number and you get it. So what did he say? It was actually his colleague who was saying that. What did he say that was not true?
Yeah, well, he said he said it's 2.5 million people who are non-citizen who are getting social security number, as this was like some sort of outrageous.
But that's
thing.
a true statement, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it is a true statement, but what you're trying to make is the case is that is some sort of an illegal thing, that it's a bad thing per se, that per se, it's a bad and negative thing. And that what I think is very dangerous, because that is an absolutely legal thing to do.
Well, but Elon Musk can't touch that. Congress can touch that, but not Elon Musk. And this is where he misleads often. Again, the guy who rails on politicians as judges, he's a politician. He understands how to troll, lie, like hats off. He's effective at it. But to Christina's
to be clear, I think in the video.
Well, and also he was basically saying that all those 2.5 million, all those 2.5 million people who have social security numbers, basically they were because they were asylum seekers, which is not true. That is absolutely not true. But anyway,
Christina, just respond to what Sean said. Sean's saying that what Musk is saying is true. You may not like it, but that it's true.
Well, what part is true? Sorry, Mark.
Just the process that if you come over the border, you claim asylum, then you can apply for the work permit. When you get the work permit, you get a social security.
Right, because you're paying taxes.
Not only that, because it's legal, but you're not doing anything that is against the law, Sean.
But that's not what he was saying. He wasn't claiming it was against the law. What he was saying was,
Sean, that's not what he was saying. And that was not the implication of it, Sean. I mean, I'm sorry. That was not the implication.
You said he was lying. So you're saying now that the implication is wrong. That's different. And this is the thing. We throw this word around, lying, as if somebody is saying 2 + 2 = 5. When you're saying 2 + 2 = 4 and I have 4x allows me to eat every day, you may say that's not that's a misinterpretation, but it's a fact. So what Elon said.
What is the fact? Sorry, what is the fact? What is the fact, Sean? Sorry, what is the fact?
The fact is that when you come over the border and claim asylum, the border guard has an opportunity then to have an administrative process that doesn't allow you to go stay in your country and remain, but to immediately grant that. He was explaining the process by which all of this happens, that under the Biden administration, you have the opportunity to issue that person a felony or misdemeanor warning because they've entered the country illegally, or the administrative person at the border can automatically allow them in, give them a work permit. What happens then is they get a social security number. They wait 5, 6, 7 years for an administrative hearing where the rate actually showing is 90% that they don't show up. Correct or not?
Correct. I don't know the statistics, so
it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot of people that don't show up, but a lot of people do show up and go through the process. So that's something that I think.
Far fewer don't show up.
Yes, but some of them. Well, in any case,
far fewer don't show up.
So the point is, yes, my point is being one, that you are saying that 2.5 million, those are 2.5 million are not from asylum seekers. There's a lot of people that came here that have things like temporary protected status, that have all the kinds of visas, or there are people who are basically people that got green cards as well as family members, as immediate relatives of US citizens. So this 2.5 million people, it's not all asylum seekers, Sean. It is not. But he made it sound like it was.
Well, I think the problem is both sides exaggerate, right? Democrats try to say everyone's honest and coming here to work, and Republicans try to say they're all criminals and illegals. And the reality is in between. There are people who don't show up, and there are legitimate people who are coming. I mean, it's
Okay. Christina, we'd love for you to come back. We'd love having you on. Very grateful to you for coming on.
Thank you for doing it the legal way. I appreciate it.
I want to get one more person in.
Please.
But I'll say again, as I said before, there are lots of Democrats and liberals and Harris supporters, Harris voters on here. They just don't raise their hands as often as the Republicans do. Would love to solve that. So we're grateful to you for raising your hand as somebody who didn't vote for Donald Trump, and we hope people will follow your example in great numbers.
And keep fighting for immigrants to have rights.
Thank you.
Well, but I just want to say that we didn't cover the part of El Salvador, and I think that was kind of my point. We went down the hill because it's very easy to talk about Elon Musk in this context, but I will be more than happy to talk more about El Salvador. I will.
Come tomorrow morning.
It's 6 o'clock in the morning for me, but sure.
I know. We're grateful to you. Thank you for getting up early and for being part of it. Grateful. All right, one more folk. Carlton Howard, welcome in. Thanks for coming. Tell folks who don't know where you are. Quick question: what's on your mind or comment after you unmute? There you go.
Is that me?
Yes, sir.
You.
Oh, good morning. Thank you very much, Mark. This is a wonderful platform. Dan, Sean, you guys are fantastic. I was a lifelong Democrat, and I'm old, so that was a long time, until 2021. January of 2021. I did, however, get very excited about the no labels effort some years ago, even contributed some money and did as much as I could to support that, and then it just kind of went away. So my question to both Dan and both Sean is, with the animus that has just gotten so fierce in the last number of years, do you detect at any level in your respective parties and caucuses that there are some reasoned, rational, mature people who admit that, guys, we really need to talk to one another. We really have to come to some kind of compromise on the major issues. Do you detect anything like that?
Yeah.
Guys.
Yes, I think both parties fear their bases still. That behavior will be rewarded, or voters, you'll see more of it when voters reward that behavior. Right now, it is still the case in both parties that if you ran on compromise and working with the other side to get 60%, that you will be attacked. The electorate rewards the purity right now. And perhaps in a couple of years, we will see the pendulum swing, because look, it goes to everything we've talked about. If I'm going to do you a favor, then you expect me to do you a favor. That is horse trading, whether it's with other countries or other members of Congress. And a lot of people don't like to hear that right now.
Sean.
So here's what I would say. There's a difference between civility and compromise when it comes to policy that you're addressing. I think that there is more and growing a little bit of sense among a lot of people about how we talk to each other and how we deal with each other. I was watching this video the other day of Tim Burchett walking down the hallway in Congress with Jasmine Crockett. And I think if you talk to a lot of these members, there's a lot of those things depending on I mean, Dan's been there, like, when I was in Longworth on the 7th floor, like, you end up being friends with everybody because no one comes up to Longworth 7th floor. Or this is the 5th, whatever. I can't remember. Cannon's 5, Longworth. But so there's a difference between that. And I think that I'm a big fan of that. Like, I believe that we, on our side of the aisle, can win more fights by attracting people to a party where our rhetoric is more welcoming, but because I think we're better on the ideas. But I think that's very different than this whole model. I think you get 40, I get 60. Like, I want people who are going to stand on principle. And I think part of the problem with Washington are these backroom deals where everybody was like, I mean, for the longest time, when Bob Michael was the Republican leader, the minority leader in the House, the Appropriations Committee worked where it was like, we'll take 70 for the Dems, the Republicans get 30. And they just, that was like, hey, that's cool. We get 30% of the money. And they get to spend it how they want. And that kept everybody happy and fat. And the Democrats were in the majority, and everybody, that was sort of bipartisanship. That's not good for the country, in my opinion. So I think there's compromising if it's 90-10. Well, if you have the majority right now, if I were Speaker Johnson, and there were some Dems that you could bring over by saying, hey, I'm going to give you 1 of 10 things that you want, or 2 of 10, because it would look better for us to have a bipartisan. I'm for that. But when you start getting beyond that, majorities are for a reason, and elections have consequences. So I'm for it. But I also think that this Washington attitude of let's all, like, you get 50% and I get 50% is why we're, $37 trillion in debt.
Carlton, thank you. Go ahead.
LBJ was willing to give away 1 or 2 judgeships if he had to, in order to solicit Republican support for something he needed to do. Do you see anything like that happening?
No,
not
under the
soon.
current environment. No
not
way.
Soon. Yep, not soon. Carlton, thank you for joining. Grateful to you. Hopefully, your vision will.
I will say, Carlton, just real quickly, just so you know, like, those are the kind of horse trades, like, at the end, when, as much as Chuck Schumer took a lot of crap for how he handled the CR, they got the DC funding. That was part of it. I mean, like, there are little things that go unnoticed in terms of timing and sequencing that is still happening behind the scenes. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but there's a little horse trading.
There is more of it than gets publicized, and members who do bipartisan stuff are frustrated because it doesn't get the same amount of coverage as the
Thank you.
conflict. Thank you for joining. Sean, remind everybody who you have on tonight.
Harrison Fields, he's Caroline's principal deputy, and we got a lot to get through.
Okay. Obviously, we'll have more on this program tomorrow on tariffs and the results of the special elections. Tonight, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, the Moynihan Report. Michael Moynihan sits down with Ethan Suplee, who is an incredible figure, actor, writer, weight gain expert, and weight loss enthusiast. His story is incredible. A great episode coming up, sponsored by
Not
the
really
Texas
sure.
Fire.
I think I might rival. I can do weight gain expert. So
Yeah.
if he needs a.
Yeah, but you should dial in and offer your perspective because you'll love this guy's story. So that's at 4 o'clock, and then at 6 o'clock I'll have a roundup of all the day's news, and then a very special episode of Two Way Tonight, sponsored by the Bonson Group. Dina Powell McCormick, Dave McCormick have during COVID with nothing to do, like everybody else, started this book, Who Believed in You. It's a book about mentorship. A lot of surprise guests of folks who are featured in the book. Some names you don't know, but some names you do. All really interesting people. So we're going to sit around and talk with them about the book and about why mentorship is so important, how it works in practice, and some really amazing stories that some of which I've heard and some of which I'm looking forward to hearing. So join us tonight, 6 o'clock, and then the three of us will be back tomorrow morning, 9 Eastern Time. As I said, we'll have plenty to talk about, including the results of the special election, which I promise we will overanalyze. No matter what.
And if you want in on the Signal group to talk to Mark about exit polls.
Yes, I'll be briefing. The first wave comes out at 3 Eastern, so I'm going to be on a Zoom. It's a secret Zoom. You can only get the login information on
We have a small Signal group, though.
Small Signal group, Jeffrey Goldberg. And so 3 o'clock is the first wave. The second wave is at 6 o'clock. And then at 9 o'clock, full results now. There are no exit polls. Please don't text me or call me. There are no exit polls. And you know what? Even if there were, you should have something better to do all afternoon. But we will look for the results. Thank you for joining. Really grateful to everyone who raised their hands and participated, including some new people, which we always like. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you at 6 tonight.